to Bratislava. Hello, Martin.
Hello, to Trnava exactly now, where I live. Well, I agree with Pavel that this question was for me also the most interesting one, and it was not easy one question. Actually, I do not have right answer, because when I look into the Bible and some of the biblical stories, both in the Old Testament and New Testament, we can see these two traditions of the temple and the prophets outside of the temple, and God is in both of them in some way. Sometimes the prophets are totally critical towards the liturgy that is in the temple. And I think that this period of COVID was also something like a critical period towards ritualism that is something sometimes present in the temples. When we talk about the heart of the liturgy or the center of the liturgy, I had in my mind two things. First is like when St. Augustine started to think about the verbum Dei audibile and visibile, so the two sides or two traditional types of the centers of the liturgy. But as a heart of the liturgy, I think something that is behind the word and behind the sacrament, something that is totally transcendent, and it is meeting with the God. It is the heart of the liturgy for me, and the center that we are trying to find there. And then the question moves that, is it possible to find or to meet with God also somewhere else? And my answer would be yes. Sometimes it's easier for the people to find God somewhere else than in the liturgy nowadays, especially in the secular world. And I had many experiences in my life that I would call worship or the service that were not part of the liturgy, when I had a good conversation with somebody in his difficult situation of the life or joyful situation of the life. On the other hand, when he met with something transcendent, something vertical, as Pavel told, when he met the God. And it was also outside the temple. And when I was thinking about this question, I had also in my mind the story of the prophet Elijah, when he was trying to find God. And the God was not in the earthquake, even not in the strong wind. He was in the silence. Sometimes we can find God somewhere totally else and meet with him than in the liturgy. And the last point that I had in my mind when I was thinking about the answer on this question was that Tomáš Halík during this period of the closed temples somehow popularized one story of Pope Francis, his interpretation of that biblical verse that Jesus is standing at the door and is knocking on the door. And Tomáš Halík told that during the COVID period, we can see that Jesus is staying at the door and knocking, but from inside to outside, to let him go out and to let the church go out back to the world. And I think this is really one of the best description of this time and of the prophetic mission of the churches, to not be close to the ritualism and to go outside and to live love of God outside in the world.
Thank you, Martin. Jana, what would you say to the question yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, hello. Hopefully hello to Brno, unless you are somewhere else.
So in my response to this question, I was thinking about the biblical scene from Exodus, from chapter 3, where Moses is keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, and he meets angel of Lord in a flame of fire out of a bush, and Moses is called and to come closer and to remove the sandals from his feet, for the place on which he is standing is holy ground. And for me, this biblical place somehow shows the place of liturgy or worship in our life. I suggest that we can understand the act of worship as the moment when one removes the sandals from his or her feet to realize that right the place on which he or she is standing is the holy ground. Right here in the course of our days, whether we work in an office or in church or in home office, it is the holy ground since God is present. Here is the flame of fire out of a bush or God's heart. So intentional liturgical practice is certain response to give God's invitation. And it is just one moment in our journey with God. But it is right the moment when we face this presence of God. Somehow we realize it, we center our heart and our mind and our body and our bare feet to God's presence. So I think that in this way, this is something special, the holy place, which is in the middle of all our living. And I think that in Old Testament, it's not just an option or a possibility, but it is task and mission of God's people to gather together to praise the Lord. And it is the way how they bear witness of God. And also in New Testament, Jesus gives his promise that he will be on the place where people get together, 2 or 3. And thus we come to what I consider to be a specific and important aspect in which the liturgy express Christian faith differently, for example, than, for example, individual prayer or conversation or good book. I think that this communal and performative character of liturgy is important, and it changes our way of living and accepting others and the way how we relate to ourselves and the others and the world.
Thank you, Jana. And can we now move to Father Václav? I hope it will work now. It doesn't work yet, please. The microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My internet connection is not very good, so I apologize. I didn't quite hear the introduction, so I don't know the question that was raised immediately just in the beginning. So you can just say in one sentence what was the question again, that I can remind myself.
And you can also see the question now, as Zdenko will put it. No, this is the second one, the first one. Do you think that liturgy or worship expresses Christian faith and human concerns in ways that are, well, reading a good book or going to pub with friends just cannot be the same way?
Yes, well, I can answer from an Orthodox perspective, of course, to a general question like that. Do you hear me? Can you hear me? Just to confirm. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My screen is just playing around. Yes. I can answer from the Orthodox perspective, maybe perhaps by reference to the Orthodox liturgical tradition itself, because if we look at the Orthodox Eucharistic tradition and the Orthodox liturgical tradition, there is no room for a separate understanding of the human being apart from God, and God apart from the human being in terms of relationships, because any feature in the Orthodox liturgy is always a synergy between God and man, but not only God and man as an individual, but especially a synergy of the people, the communion gathering to celebrate the Eucharist as a unifying moment with not only God but with other human beings. So if I would say the central question, the central feature of the Orthodox liturgy in this respect is a synergy, is a cooperation. From the other discussions that I've heard before, I think it's also a good idea to mention one thing, is that if we look at the Apocalypse story, there is a situation which I think profoundly expresses even the Orthodox perception of the temple, the liturgy, and this kind of synergy I was speaking of. The fact is that in the Apocalypse there is no temple. I mean, there is no visible building or temple that we are supposed to encounter, or the story depicts. And I think this is very related to the Orthodox perspective, where the temple, understood as a sacrificial area where we sacrifice ourselves for love and for communion, is basically the entire world. That is that ideally there is no temple. I mean, the entire world should be one big temple in terms of sacrifice and synergy between people and God. So I think that is a dimension which also illustrates a bit the Orthodox perspective on these matters. And in terms of the Orthodox perspective, if I can just finish this thought, I'm not sure if I have much time or what is the situation. I would like to mention, can you hear me? Can we hear each other, right? Yes. I would like to mention perhaps one important feature of the anaphora in the Orthodox tradition, where this, as we're speaking about the horizontality or the vertical sort of understanding, it's completely present as this moment of this encounter just before the anaphora. And if I may refer to the heart there, that we say in the liturgy that we express our unity in love, and this unity in love immediately precedes an exclamation by the priest: we have our hearts we raise our hearts before you, which means that the entire community gathered in the liturgical moment, in this before the anaphora, before the sacrificial unity offered by the Eucharist, is gathered in love, prepared completely to accept a unity, or let's say the offer that Christ or God offers to humanity. So the synergical moment is clearly expressed in the context of the heart, which is the theme of the conference, exactly before the anaphora, where it is clearly stated that only a pure heart raised to God is capable of this communion, not only with God, but among people themselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. My first question was an attempt really to rephrase Marx. Liturgy as the heart in the heartless world, and basically to question the heartlessness of the world, even if we don't take the heart as illusory. And thank you for the emphasis on the sacramentality of life, on the transcendence, on the holy ground and God's presence, and really on the state which is described in Apocalypse, when there is no temple, but there are pure hearts. This is very helpful. You already answered a little bit to the second question, where I asked how would you explain the liturgy, the catechumens, and what would be, according to you, the center, or even whether you would consider the language about the center helpful or unhelpful. And I think here especially there would be two sub-questions which are important to me. One would be more in the liturgical and sacramental traditions. How do you explain that the complexity of liturgy, the other part of the body rather than the heart alone, are so important when people, even religious people today, are so strongly driven to what is immediate? They want everything immediately. So, well, what would you describe as the helpful challenge liturgy presents? And on the other hand, the attempts to translate, which Viorel already mentioned, and I think which we are trying to engage also in this afternoon, they also have some difficulties encountering when it comes to liturgy. Most of you probably know some of the worships where you rather wouldn't be there, when it reminded you a kind of kindergarten party for the adults, or an intellectual society where the mystery of God, the holy ground, or the transcendence were so downplayed that it was just something else. So please, your responses to the second area of questions. And we can start maybe differently. So maybe we can start with Martina this time.
Okay, thank you. In my church, Czechoslovak Hasa Church, we have a singing liturgy. We really miss singing these days. It is something really strange to recite during the liturgy and not to sing. And the singing liturgy by Karel Farský, the first patriarch and bishop, is a dialogue of priests and lay people who serve the worship together. The moment where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he is among them, is from my point of view one of the peaks of this liturgy. And of course the first part of worship is worship of God, word, and the second is Eucharistic celebration. And the rest of the questions, I'm meeting a lot of adult people who would like to be baptized, who express their desire to be a member of church, but they still don't understand what does it mean to be a member of church and to be part of a liturgical life of parish. And at the first point, they say, I would like to be baptized, but later on, they somehow refuse the community and they are not understanding the meaning of the church as a body of Christ. And they need some time and experiences with liturgy, with a special place and atmosphere of this whole encounter and during the liturgy. And also the language of the church and liturgy is sometimes quite difficult to understand for many people who are not regular visitors in the church or who have no experiences with the liturgical services, and they really need explanation. It's not sufficient to have just liturgy printed and read it, because they don't understand the meaning of the words. And in our liturgy, I have experienced that people even don't understand parts or sentences of this text, and they cannot live it when they have no understanding what does it really means. So I think we as a clergy need a patience, and we should devote time to express what does it mean and try to explain them. And the church as whole itself, we should try to make a modern way how to express ourselves. I really love Farský's liturgy. It is a gift and it is a really nice memory, but sometimes in 21st century the wording doesn't work, and it's quite pity, because the idea of the liturgy is in our churches is beautiful.
Thank you, Martina. Can we move to Martin?
Yes, of course. Thank you also for this question. Well, this connection with the catechumenate is a really interesting one, especially with the adults or young adults that are preparing for the baptism. It's interesting. Well, from my personal experience, I was baptized as a baby. I grew up in quite traditional Roman Catholic environment in Slovakia. And I have to say that when I was like at the age of 8 or 9 years, the liturgy was totally not understandable for me. We were going to the church, but it was like a cultural event for me. And, you know, it was something very well what is happening there, but it is only empty ritual for you. And this was a stage of my life that I know the structure of the liturgy and what to do, but I did not understand it well. As a teenager, I had a possibility that I started my preparation for the confirmation, and for the first time in my life, it was my personal decision for the faith, let's say. That my parents told me that, it's up to you. You can go there or not. And I decided to go, and I started to be an acolyte, and it totally changed my perspective to the liturgy, literally and symbolically, because I moved to the front of the altar, and I seen the whole liturgy from totally different perspective, and I started to study more about the liturgy myself, and it totally changes the perspective of a person. When we divide the liturgy for the stage and the audience, it is something really bad. So yeah, thank you, Ivana. So when the liturgy starts to be the personal experience and something that you are involved in, it totally changes your mind. Therefore, during the catechumenate, I'm inviting people to be somehow more involved in the liturgy. And there is also this process of the liturgical revival when you are trying also somehow to use the godparents to introduce the baptized one to the liturgy, to tell him more, to speak about the personal experience of faith. And I think this is a very helpful aspect nowadays.
Thank you, Martin. Jana, I will ask for your response, and perhaps with a special focus to the end of the question, because you before already beautifully said how you understand worship. So how to avoid the pitfalls that I mentioned in the question? Yes.
Well, what I try to explain to catechumens is I usually start with the moment of baptism as a foundation for understanding our life in liturgy. And I start to explain that baptism has to do a lot with our identity, with our name. And worship service or liturgy is the time where we kind of download. It's the moment when we download, upgrade our software or our hardware. And it's the problem in our church, in Evangelical Church of Czech Brethren, is that the worship service is very much focused on sermon. It's oriented to intellectual understanding quite a lot, not so much liturgical, I would say, or simple liturgy. Sometimes very simple, and sometimes it's full of ideas of the pastor or minister, and kind of creativity exercise, I would say sometimes. So what I try to explain to catechumens is that worship service is not built up by our creativity or by our effort or by our intellectual understanding or the information value in the service. It's more based on, or it is important to get in touch with the holy ground, to use this image. I think that it is important to realize that liturgical celebration or liturgy, it is an experience when we, or it is a moment when we can experience that we are actually being served, that it is service for us, that to participate in liturgy means mainly to accept Lord's service, to accept Lord's word, to let Holy Spirit act, to accept or experience Lord's mercy. It is the Holy Land in the sense that we can afford to have bare feet while we are being served, in contrast to many situations in which we are concentrate on our own effort or our own intellect and so.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you. Father Václav, what would be your response?
Well, again, I will be coming from probably an Orthodox perspective, but I have to remind one thing that perhaps is not really realized in understanding the Orthodox liturgy, is that the Eucharistic service on Sundays or whatever day it happens is not really the only event that is Eucharistic or liturgical, but we have to speak and we have to see it in a dimension of constant preparation and prayers and life, which is when the Eucharist is just a culmination. What I wanted to draw attention is to that in the Orthodox world now, we don't see that in the secular society in countries where the Orthodox Church is not traditionally present, because we have lost this I would say universalistic understanding of liturgy because of various reasons, of course, but and the liturgy in the Orthodox tradition is now only limited to, say, Sunday or certain days. But if you look at any Orthodox tradition which was I mean happening, I don't know, a couple of 100 years ago, you will realize I had myself the chance of serving in a village like this, where there was no escaping the liturgy. I mean, every day there were prayers for every possible activity that you could do. Every possible activity was sacramental, even if it wasn't a prayer, even if it was just moving around. All of this was part of the Eucharist. So that means that the Sunday worship or any Eucharistic service was just a culmination of this entire universal and cosmic liturgy that was going on in an everyday, every minute basis. If, for example, if you look at some other religions like Judaism or Islam, this kind of perception is still there from one reason or another, I think. Whereas in the Christian perspective, even in the Orthodox tradition, that has been lost. And that what happens next is that if you lose this, then you see the liturgy only as a one-time event which happens at a certain period, and then you ask yourself, how come I'm not participating in this liturgy? Well, you're not participating in this liturgy because you have not participated in it before. I mean, you have not participated in its preparation. The liturgy is not something you come to and participate in. This participation is a culmination. One of the problems with the Orthodox perception of that is that it's been in a sense by some modern Orthodox theologians, like for example Alexander Schmemann, who emphasized the universality of the Eucharist, that everybody should participate and so on. But the problem is that this has to be balanced by the fact that you need to prepare for this. And one thing that I can say from a pastoral point of view is that all these concepts like sacrifice, synergy that I was talking about, they may sound extremely mystical and sacramental, but the problem is that they are a complete reflection of reality. And if you look at the Orthodox community, for example, where I serve now in Prague, misunderstanding of what it is to be in a community. People simply come for the Eucharist as to participate in some sort of holy event, but there is no sense of sacrifice that one can have towards one's neighbors or any works whatsoever. There's no perception of the necessity of sacrifice, which I think was present in the previous I don't know eons or ages that the church was living in. So I think that is a problem. If you don't realize sacrifice, if you don't realize all these basic things, then of course even your participation, whatever it is, even if it's direct or indirect, is just not existing in the liturgy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Father Václav. Pavel.
Yeah, when I try to explain to someone the importance of the liturgy, I try to explain the importance of ritual in general. I think that there is a difference between ritual and magic. The rituals is something that that transforms us, that touches us, maybe in a little bit other way that only the study or studying or thinking or the intellectual way. The ritual is something that that should transform us, as it was said already before. And I think that the question of the heart of liturgy, I think it's important to try to search it, because when we forget the heart, the meaning of liturgy, it could become the caricature or something formal or misunderstood. So the heart, I think, is something that should be always asked or looked for. And there was another question: how to make worship accessible or useful today. I would say I would have 3 points to this. The first one is for me, it's a simplification of the liturgy, because I consider it necessary. Simplification doesn't mean banalization, but simplicity is something that is beautiful and also powerful. So one thing should be the simplification. The other is the accent to inner disposition of participants. It means that it's not something that can arrive only from outside. If we are not, as Father Václav said, if we are not prepared, if we are not open. And so the inner disposition of the participants of liturgy. And the third one, I would say it's the contemplative dimension of liturgy or connection with the contemplation. I visited a community of Bonneau this summer in France, where the Benedictine Lawrence Freeman, who dedicates himself to the meditation already 40 years, and he celebrate. They call it the contemplative Eucharist, and they insert to the Eucharistic celebration a lot of time of silence and meditation. And I think it's and at the same time they simplify it as much as possible. And I think that it should be the way how to make the liturgy accessible and useful also today in the today's world.
Thank you very much, everyone, again, and thank you, Father Václav. I would say probably from one of the best expansions of Eucharistic ecclesiology I have heard. Very practical, very down to earth. Thank you for the emphasis on the life of preparation, which is organic part of any ritual, or otherwise without it the ritual doesn't work. For the relationship of the heart and the whole, which appeared in all your responses. For the emphasis on the bare feet, Jana, which I enjoyed very much, that this is something which we can come with. And for the distinction between simplification and bagatelization, and for other things which I find quite helpful. We will now move to the third question, which I put somewhere and I cannot find it. Yes, I can find it now. Good. What aspects of liturgical life did you miss the most during the COVID restrictions? Some of you already responded to that, but perhaps you can go more deeply in the area. Were there any new discoveries of good practices you would like to share, in which the mystical and the social, the consoling and the transforming dimensions of worship were tangible? And we can start with Martin.
So, some difficulties or something that I was missing during the COVID. Well, first of all, it was this type of personal nearness, or how to say, you know, we use these technologies and we now have also this conference online, but it's something totally different when we meet together. And you can see, especially after some weeks, that the people are totally tired, because this technology is not bringing the nearness. And it reminds me the Heidegger's work that the technology brought us many good things, but not this human touch, let's say, with one another. And especially in the celebration of the sacraments, this is very complicated actually, because you need this nearness. So it was the biggest challenge also for the liturgical type of the churches. When you want to celebrate Eucharist, you are trying to find a way. And these discussions about how to celebrate the Eucharist were very inspiring for me. And it was touching, on the one hand, the tradition, the liturgical tradition, and somehow how to be truthful towards this this tradition of our churches. On the other hand, there were these experiments of some churches, especially from the Reformed tradition, how to celebrate online also the Eucharist. And I was trying to be sensitive towards all of these approaches and to watch them. And this is actually one of the advantages of this era, because especially when you are a priest or a clergyman somewhere, it's quite difficult to see your colleagues, how do they do that in their parishes. And now we had a unique opportunity to see in the kitchen how they cook their meal, actually the liturgical meal in their parishes. And all the best preachers and priests that you admire somehow, and you know, were online, and you had possibility throughout the whole Europe and countries in the world to watch all of them, how do their liturgy, and to try to find the inspiration. So for me, I was trying to use this possibility and opportunity to somehow be in touch through the world. And on the other hand, also the ecumenical challenges of this virtual celebration, because we had a possibility to see how our colleagues in different churches do the liturgy, what are their special types of the celebration and aspects and crucial aspects of the sermons. So this was the most inspiring part of me, of this period. And I hope we will be able to somehow bring them also physically to our life of the churches after the COVID period.
Thank you very much, Martin. Jana?
For me, probably the most difficult aspect of this situation with COVID was that it wasn't possible to celebrate together, in the sense that we couldn't see or hear reaction of the others. I know that there were possibilities to celebrate on Zoom and so on. But in our congregation, for example, we had this broadcasting, but with no Zoom, just like to internet, and I couldn't hear any responses or reactions. I couldn't see the other people, and it was like in radio, and it wasn't good for me. And also what I realize is that for me, it is important that I can celebrate worship services together with all generations, time to time. It means including children and young people. And it's not possible to celebrate, for example, with children. It's not possible to engage other senses than just hearing. It's not possible to engage, for example, taste, smell, to be close to each other and react immediately to their ideas or so. So this was the most difficult part of the restrictions for me. Even now, when the situation is better and was better, and it was possible to meet together in church, still it wasn't good and possible to celebrate in this way, full, with singing and with touching or tasting and smelling and so on. And it was discovery.
Thank you very much, Jana. Father Václav, with microphone.
Yes, can you hear me?
No.
All right. Okay. Well, it was a very difficult, I think, period because it provoked a lot of theological and spiritual questions within the Orthodox Church itself, which are not yet somehow discussed fully. There will be perhaps time for that. But of course, for the Orthodox Church, the Eucharist, as I said already, is a communal event. The priest cannot serve the liturgy by himself. He cannot do anything without reference to the community. So the problem is that the challenge was how to an event as a event of unification, while at the same time being limited by all these measures. And the debate is whether virtual reality or any other forms of reality really does offer the full bodily experience which the Eucharistic service has to offer. And of course, we are returning back to maybe almost a sort of theological reflection on Christological things of what it is to be a body, what it is to physically be present with other people, what it is to be speaking, what it is to all the anthropological issues at hand have to be addressed, because in the Eucharist, in the Orthodox tradition, all these things are brought in. The cosmos is brought in. The cosmos is brought in with plants. The cosmos is brought in with everything that is creation itself. So creation has to participate in a holistic sense in this Eucharist. And the problem is that if you limit one of these aspects and say, okay, now we can only participate through this or that medium, then this is somehow negated. It's jettison, which doesn't of course mean that the substance of love or sacrifice and other things that are related is just not existing, but the cosmic dimension of the Eucharist is just simply missing in this kind of situation. And the issue is whether the liturgy or the Eucharistic service should go ahead with such conditions at all, or it should be limited to other liturgical forms that the Church has, of course, in its tradition, which is a very rich liturgical tradition. We don't have to have the Eucharist in order to, I don't know, talk with God, talk with other people, and carry on in love and so on. So that was a very huge problem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Father Václav. Pavel?
Yeah, what I was missing during the COVID restriction, I think it was already said a few more times. I was missing the real community, and in some sense, I was missing the liturgy at all, because without the community, it's impossible to celebrate, as it was said. Someone, I think it was Tomáš Halík, who said it, that we are speaking about real presence of Christ in Eucharist or in liturgy, but we should also speak about the real presence of people, because when it is missing, it's not liturgy, as if the real presence of Christ would missing. And what was positive or discoveries, I think that it brought some occasions, for example, to try to search the other ways to nurture our faith, the personal way or devotion, how to nurture this relationship to God, and also how to conserve the community with the others, or the liturgy in small groups. I think that it's also some experience that could be positive, or it was occasion for revision of some stereotypes, because we have in the church or in the celebration, we have stereotypes, and we are not reflecting on it in the normal going of things. So it was this occasion also. And I think that also the thirst of liturgy is positive, as something that we desire, as it was also said. When we desire something, we have it in a certain sense. And we have the fruits of liturgy when we desire liturgy, I think, or in some way. It's not absolute, of course.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Pavel. And before Martina will give us the final answer, I will ask others to prepare with the chat, either to apply for the discussion or to put your questions there, so that we can continue straight afterwards with the second part. So Martina, please.
Also this month we have closed the church after long discussion, which is a terrifying moment for every priest to put the paper with the announcement that the church is closed, and it was difficult during the Easter because of Easter, and now it is difficult because of people who are asking for liturgies and for visiting churches and for a space for a prayer. So it is a very, very tough time for our priests who are closing their churches. And but what I really like is the ability of people and their desire to help to each other. The level of volunteering is really huge in my parishes. I'm serving in 2 parishes, and all members are active and ready to help to each other, to bring some food, to pray via phone, and to write intercessions and sending to me so I can share it and spread it through the parish. So this level of people's desire to be active and to help and to find ways how to worship together even though the church is closed is something that is quite mystical for me, because it is a symbol of compassion, it is a symbol of Christian love, and it is something very inspirational. And I hope that in the future we will not in need to have these disasters as COVID to be active and to realize that we really love our communities and we need our spiritual lives in community and in prayer and in acts of love and mercy.
Thank you very much. So we have moved, or maybe rather expanded the holy ground, the transcendence, the sacramentality for the real community and the real presence of people, for the personal nearness, for the cosmic dimension that is tangible. And I think this brings us back again to the question, what is central in liturgy? The question which is not necessarily exclusivist, that would say, well, all the other things do not matter. Some people may put precisely these qualities of liturgy to brackets, but we could see that they cannot remain in the brackets. But now this is time to expand the discussion for everyone. So please, can you show me who wants to speak? A question from Tim. Tim. Yeah. Tim. Okay. Tim, you have a question there. Please, can you read and say your question?
I don't know if I can read it because I've lost it. Okay. Yeah, sorry. I can now. I found it. I can read it. No, just I mean, I think I basically agree with what people have been saying, but as that's boring, I wanted to ask a question to kind of change. So if talking about, for example, like the kind of cosmic presence or real presence and things like that, in fact, when our churches were closed, whether this didn't cause us to rethink something about the scope of reality. So, for example, is the online world not part of the cosmos, or are people not really present in many different ways that we hadn't realized before that they could be present? You know, so are we not present to each other in some way at the moment, for example? Yeah, I think that would be my question.
So whoever wants Tim's it off. Good. No. No, you. Okay, yes, you can hear me now. So whoever from the panel wants to respond to that, please feel free. Father Václav.
Well, I don't know it's of course a complex question, but I have to say that my church wasn't closed during the crisis. I mean, I didn't close it at all.
About it.
So it's completely the question is perhaps out of place, but the church was open all the entire crisis, and it was open even more than it was before. I mean, and it was actually good because it forced us to open it in a more disciplinary way than we had before, perhaps. I mean, so the church was open. That doesn't mean that we didn't obey the restrictions or that we were disobeying the state laws, but the church was open. Anybody could come in, prayer, whatever. And this was not because we wanted to somehow negate restrictions, but we were open for those who were prepared to go into the church and who needed to go into the church at a particular moment and for a particular purpose. This does not mean that, of course, we served liturgies for many people or for hundreds of people, anything like that, but the church was open. So I wouldn't see it as a problem. And even if we physically closed the doors, the church was still open because the priest or anybody who's a member, or not even the priest, but even the believers, whatever, they were walking out there and, so to speak, participating in any event that was needed in a communal experience where somebody needed help, somebody needed I don't know, to bring the Holy Communion to their homes and so on. So the church was not really closed physically, either practically or physically. Even if we, you know, accepted the position where the door would be closed physically. So I think it just a bit relativizes then the question. I mean, that the temple wasn't separate. There's no way you can close, I don't know, the church or Christ. I mean, that's how I would answer that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody else wants to respond? Pavel?
Yeah, it's a very nice provocative question, Tim. I don't have all the arguments, but for the presence, I think that it's another type of presence, the virtual presence, and yeah, I think that in some way it could be deeper when we are not physically present. We could be spiritually closer one to each other. But at the same time, I think that the real meeting with people is something that that is really expression of this horizontal being of us as physical body, spiritual beings. So yeah, I think that rethinking the modes of presence, it's good, but I don't think so that it could replace the online virtual presence could replace at all the physical, the real or the physical presence. Okay, let's say.
I have to say that Tim was yesterday missing you really very badly, and so was I after we switched the computers. But anybody else wants to say something to this question? If not, we can move to the next question by Dennis. Dennis, do you want to say your question? If you want to say your question, it would be good if you put the microphone. Good.
Yes, I can speak now. Well, my question is, I hear a lot from many people that they're struggling, and we are discussing it actually now. But the question is, what are the positive or some good discoveries that we have right now, or something we want to keep, or maybe we extended our perspective on what worship can be, or how we can communicate, and what are these things and what we want to keep. Then the quarantine is over and we will come back to so-called normal life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So who would want to start responding? Dig deep down and find something hopeful. Difficult.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think even before the pandemic.
It's Felipe speaking, I guess.
Yes, that's me.
I know, but we want to see you as well.
Well, I'm here. Can you see?
Good.
Okay. Well, I wanted to say that even before the pandemic, I've seen a few times people using social media to address God and to make prayers. And I find that a bit disturbing because social media to some extent becomes a temple, and people use social media as a meeting place with God. And I find that a bit disturbing. I can't really explain why, but I don't feel very comfortable with this, with the fact that social media not only becomes the public square or the meeting place for politics, but also the meeting place for the sacred. And maybe that's a little bit too much.
Thank you, Felipe. Anybody else wants to come in, either from panel or anybody else? Please.
Maybe I can just say, yes, maybe I can just say a general remark. I remember very well, for example, in the 60s, not me personally, but if we refer to the 60s, where the Roman Catholic Church, for example, some of its theologians were trying to find Christ everywhere because they had this sense that the world is somehow expanding to the expense of the church, to the expense of the sacred, so to speak. And there's a trend in Roman Catholic theology where it says that, as probably everybody knows, which tends to see God and Christ in a kind of anonymous Christianity, to use Rachner's term, everywhere. So I think, I mean, we are left with the situation where we have to find Christ everywhere, even if it's virtual media or in some sort of galaxy or somewhere. But the problem is that whether this is an ideal situation is a different question. I mean, I think in the end result, if, for example, we are locked down in a prison, or if I'm a hermit living in a desert, I have to find Christ there too. I have to find him everywhere. I have to find him in enemies. Just like the, for example, Desert Fathers clearly specified, you have to find Christ even in the devil, even you have to find their Christ there. So I don't think it's a problem of that we're limiting or expanding the notion of where Christ is. The question is that whether this is the ideal situation, and we're
We lost you now. Okay, it seems that the internet connection of Father Václav has gone, so maybe we will find him again later. What? He's back there. Father Václav, are you back there? We lost you for a while. Do you want to finish your sentence with the microphone on? We can't hear you.
Again?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now? Yeah? Yes? You hear me now?
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to finish the sentence by saying that, there was already this problem with finding God, yeah? But I think there is no exclusivity. I mean, in the sacredness, God is everywhere and in every medium. But the problem is that whether we should support this actively as the only medium, or in the future as the primary medium, that's a different question. Like, for example, if somebody tells me that, you have to positively support the internet or Facebook or any other means because that is a good thing, I will say, well, that is a good thing, but there are many better things of how to do things than Facebook or virtual reality. But if I'm left with only Facebook, I have no other option than finding Christ even there. I mean, of course, but that's not the intentional way of how we should do things, I think.
This is exactly what we feel about technology. Thank you. We have next question by Marieke. Marieke, hello, greetings to Amsterdam. Please rephrase your question and put your microphone on.
Yeah, I hope. Hello. I don't have a question. I have only a remark from my own experience with giving lessons, celebrate, and for me it's essential to be in the same place and to can see each other. And so it was just my experience, and I agree with the last speaker. When we don't have anything else, we are happy to have this, but that was my question.
Thank you very much. Are there any more comments or questions either to the speakers or to the general audience? Martin.
Yeah, I only want to reflect on both questions of Tim and Dennis, maybe a little bit later on. Yeah, I was thinking all the time about it. Well, the question towards the reality, yeah, there are definitely different type of realities, and concerning the services, we were thinking about two type of realities, and it is the presence of the people at the worship and the presence of the Christ in the Eucharist during such worship that we celebrate at home. I have read several studies on both of them. And basically we had these two possibilities how to celebrate during the COVID. One was that only the priest was celebrating the worship on a camera and people were watching the live stream. On the other hand, some of the communities were celebrating together via Zoom or different type of applications when they could celebrate together and share the roles within the liturgy and so on and react to one another. And I think that this second type was something quite good because people were still somehow in touch. It was not only one-man show. The first type of doing the worship was like more clerical, and some people who wanted to somehow rule still over the people were using this type, while the second type was much more democratical, let's say, in my point of view. But what I can say that even though we had not that type of nearness that we meet together and we can shake the hands and talk together with the friends, there was a different type of nearness towards the people who usually do not have a possibility to attend the worship. So the people who are ill, who are sick somewhere in the hospitals, the retired people or people in the different areas within the country had this feeling of nearness, that they are somehow included in the community. And that is something good that we should work on that somehow, how to be in touch with the people outside who are in quarantine for a longer time than only for the COVID period. So this is like first type of a discovery. And the second type is, especially within the Church of England, I can see now that they are organizing, for example, now the seminars, how to celebrate the Advent and Christmas in COVID period this year, already now, how to do it virtually and better than during the Easter. So one of the things that we can learn from this period is that the church has to be where the people are and has to be prepared for difficult times and you know, to be adaptable to the new situations. So I think this is one of the important things, to be where the people are. And when the people are online, we should be online and to try to find a way how to be in touch with them.
Oh, thank you, Martin. I was thinking also of people who don't have computers, who do not know how to operate computers, with whom you are lucky if they manage to get the phone, because they may forget to charge the phone, like my mother. And I think these people, they felt exceptionally isolated in this period. Because the media, which were possible to mediate at least something for some people, just couldn't do the same work for them. And I think they were also on the losing side in this situation. And yeah, it was a challenge how to include them. Anyway, any more responses or questions? Please. Jana. Then Katerina. No. Okay, Jana. Jana, please.
Yes. I think that there is also some certain danger, because what I consider as important in worship is also that people step out of their comfort zone, that it is somehow true to worship that we meet together also with our mistakes, and we face our imperfections and our sins, and that liturgy is there also to expose us to situations which we would often prefer to avoid, for example. And in this way of celebrating or following different services, it was also quite often that people just follow what they like. And of course, the presence is possible. It is possible for me to share with you our thoughts, your questions, my answers, your answers, and so on. But for example, you are in your comfort zone, you cannot see my annoying cat here around and something. So this is a bit danger, because then I realized that after the lockdown, certain people, they just used to this comfortable way of following social media and worship services, and it's not necessary to go to church to meet those people, for example, in big congregation when there are not so close relationships.
So. Thank you. I think when we shifted now to the discussion about the COVID restrictions, which were in the spring and which are at least in this country coming back, it's almost a rephrasal of the heartless world. We called it not the heartless world, but the non-ideal situation. What do we do in the non-ideal situation when something vital is missing? But we have the next question or comment by Tabitha. Hello, Tabitha. Please say what you have written.
Yeah, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Yeah. So I would like to ask you and connect my question with the topic of the whole conference. The liturgy should help us to recognize what is central in our lives. And my question is, what is your experience as pastors and liturgists with this task in the contemporary situation of closed churches? Is it less or more easy or difficult now to mediate in liturgy this what is central in our lives? And the next question, what forms of ritual communication do you find helpful if we cannot meet physically and if we can only do some online services or communicate online? Thank you.
Thank you. And as you can see the question written down, as well as Denko will put it there, I will ask maybe the all panel very briefly to respond to this question, and this may be the concluding question. What? Is Tabitha's question visible for everybody? Yes, great, it is. So who wants to start from the panel? Or I will ask you if you don't want to. Who would be my victim? Whom I didn't ask to start yet. Jana, can you start? Jana disappeared. No, she is here. Jana, would you like to start?
It's a difficult question.
It is. It's a very good question. It brings us back to the conference.
It's a very good question. Well, for me, but I suppose it's my personal point of view, the problem is quite a lot connected to the celebration of Eucharist or the Lord's Supper. There was a big discussion in our church how to communicate this celebration, and I think that this is one of the important points, and it shows how difficult it is to deal with all these aspects. I don't know if it's easier or more difficult than before COVID. I have no idea.
Yeah, thank you. So what is central in our life? What has the situation of closed churches revealed about that? Martina.
According to my experience, it depends, because my pastoral experiences are quite short, so I cannot compare it with the difficult times. But well, when I'm talking to people now, it's much more difficult for me to bear witness about hope and light and everything when I see that people's very close family members and friends are suffering. And in Strašnice, in a small chapel, we have quite old congregation or parish, and people were quite afraid to come to the church, even during the summer. So for me, I asked one of the sisters, and I visited people personally. And when I saw their need to have somebody who cares about them spiritually and pastorally, I realized how difficult it is to fulfill my my work or service when I should see everybody individually. So I've decided to ask younger members to help them to establish a Skype connection, and we were able to make group Skype calls, and we prayed together. And it was something unusual when I saw younger family members who were caring for their grandparents and learning them how to deal with the computer, or just help them at that moment. And for me, it's difficult, but still I think we are quite useful these days. It is very, very important to keep going and try to care of our congregations, and try to find a creative way how to celebrate, and how to during the Easter, many families were trying to establish their own worships. So this creativity is something very rare and inspirational. So it is a difficult, but also it is a nice time, because I see that many people are trying to do their best. And well, yeah.
Thank you. Pavel, what would be your response to Davita's question?
Yeah, I think that this situation is a kind of fasting, or the experience of fasting, maybe, or experience of missing, or I wouldn't call it absolutely positive on the first level, but we can learn also from missing, also from losing. We can learn also from when we discover that we are missing the community and meeting people and celebrating. Maybe we recognize how important is it for us, and so I wouldn't replace it in the banal way by something which is like the rituals, like the real rituals, because it would be replacement. But maybe also to try to learn from missing. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin.
Well, actually, I was very surprised when during the first wave of this COVID period, how the gospel readings from the ecumenical lectionary were fitting totally the situation, because I think that the first gospel reading when the churches were closed for the first time on Sunday was the Gospel of John, chapter 4, where Jesus is meeting the Samaritan woman and is talking with her that we will not pray in Jerusalem or on your holy mount, but the priority is to pray in the spirit and the truth. And it was totally like fitting in the time, the situation, and I think that these liturgical readings were helping somehow to touch the whole situation and try to understand it in a different way. How to help the people around us. I think that naturally it led us more to the what we call social gospel. So how to practically help people around us, how to live love, how to bring nearness to the people who are somewhere at the borders of the society and of the churches. And I think this was one of the most inspiring things for me. And as I already mentioned in the beginning, that image, I have it all the time during this period in front of me of Jesus knocking on the door from inside. How to go with the church and with the mission of Jesus back to the world, and how to bring it to the people in a different and more practical way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Martin. Father Václav.
Well, I think I can answer that on two levels. I was just remembering Gregory of Nazianzus. I just realized one thing that not realized, but I can mention that he got very tired of the church at a certain point in his life, and was very tired of people, and was very tired of everything around the hierarchy. And he decided to do what everybody does in the Orthodox Church, whether it's a physical restriction or any other form of restriction. And that is that he lived a life of prayer, internal prayer, which is basically even the theme that I was talking about today in the morning, that whatever the reason why we isolated, whether it's because of disease or it's because of personal relationship, because of exile or whatever we call it, the fact is that interior prayer and prayer that the Orthodox Church offers gives you everything you need for a relationship with the world. And that is, we have to realize that, for example, even the early desert fathers, when they left the cities, the towns in Egypt, in Palestine, Syria, whatever, they left these communities in order to be able to live with these communities. They didn't leave them because they wanted to escape something, but they needed to find a new relationship with these communities and with the world at large, which is, I think, one of the possibilities and I think one of the beautiful things about perhaps from a situation like this. But the problem is, of course, is that at least from the Orthodox perspective, unfortunately, the people, or the parishioners, the Christians, they don't know how to draw from this tradition. They don't know it. They don't study. They don't realize these possibilities, and that is a problem, because if you don't realize these possibilities, then you cannot use them, of course, at least in the Orthodox tradition.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There are other questions, and unfortunately we would not have time for them, about the freedom of religion and forced closing of the churches. Yes, there has been much discussion on that, Marieke, but I hope that we will be able to continue with our debate tomorrow. Before we close the session together, I would want to thank all the panelists. And Zdenko will show us what we can look forward to, at least in some hybrid form, for tomorrow. So you can see that we will start at 3 o'clock. You will have a free morning, but as you will see later, there will be some points of contact for the free morning. We will start at 3 with a session on the world as heartless with question mark, a hermeneutics of place, with Georgios and Catherine giving their presentations. And then after the coffee break, we will have the final session on searching for the heart in literature with Pavel Hošek and Michael Corwan. And then we will have the conclusion of the conference at 6:30. So I hope that you will manage still to stay with us, and thank you for being very brave today. And now I will pass my word on to Martina and Kateřina. Kateřina.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
So thank you. I think what we can do again in this situation, we can pray together, even if physically separated. We can meet at one time as yesterday. And today there will be also like this personal prayer in the evening at 9 o'clock. And I will pass my word to Martina, who will explain what we are supposed to do or some inspiration for the evening.
I would like to invite you to read a chapter from this book. I received it in Vatican during the Synod, Bishop Synod in 2018. And it is a book that can be used during the biblical lessons or for individual spirituality. It brings a text, biblical passages, commentaries, and there is also part with the reflections and let's meditate and think about the main idea, discussing questions, etc. So I would like to show you this book. For example, you can use it within your parishes or for your own, but it's very simple. So I've decided to share it with you. And we can read the text, or you can choose the passages you like, and afterwards you can continue with the questions and meditations and discussion questions for your own use.
Thank you very much. And there will be one more opportunity to meet or encounter in prayer tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And we will pray together Jesus' prayer. We have a very nice experience already from the first lockdown, where we met usually in the evening to pray the Jesus prayer or the heart, the prayer of the heart from the Eastern tradition of the church. I shared with you, and you have it also in the shared folder, the small description of the Jesus prayer. We will meet tomorrow at 9 o'clock till 9:30, but of course it depends on how you feel. Some of you are already experienced with the Jesus prayer because we have Father Václav and some other Orthodox, so I don't have to explain a lot. For those who are not experienced at all, you have small, tiny description in the folder from my side. It's a repetitive prayer. The most frequent version is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Sometimes added as sinner, but you can have the shorter forms. I also put it there in the folder. You can choose the language, your language, or some other, in Greek, Russian, it depends on you. And stay still. It's a point to find inner silence, to stand before God with our mind and our heart. So it's another opportunity for tomorrow at 9 o'clock. And I think I can end up here. We have to put our mask to be together to greet you. So